Hello, my name is Manassas.
I'm Manassas. I'm Scott Hillman.
Hey, Scott Hillman. So you work for the IMSAR?
Yes, I work for IMSAR. I've been there for just over 3 years now.
What can you tell us about the company?
So IMSAR was started in 2004. Our CEO was attending BYU and had a master's project where he created a very small synthetic aperture radar sensor to create images using radar technology.
So, what kind of groups have you worked with?
Typically, IMSAR works with United States government groups to include the U.S. Army, U.S. Marine Corps, U.S. Navy, the Air Force. We've also done some work with Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection, and then last year we did a little bit of work. We had some local wildfires, so we worked with the United States Forest Service, Type 1 and Type 2 fire incident commands.
Oh, okay. So how did IMSAR help out with the hollow fire?
Because those fires were local and they were threatening our communities, what we did was we offered to use our technology in our aircraft to fly over those fires and provide imagery and information to the incident commander so they could track where the fire was going, how fast it was burning, and if it was threatening any homes or recreational areas.
That's cool.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. It was fun.
So what can you tell us about the hollow fire?
So the Coal Hollow fire, there were actually two big fires last year, and we covered both. But the one we'll talk about today is the Coal Hollow fire we did the most work on. It was about a 30,000 acre fire. Started in Dairy Fork over there by US 6, just east of Spanish Fork. It was a pretty fast-moving fire, and there were a lot of heavy fuels, they call them, which are big trees, and dried timber in there. Creates kind of a dangerous condition for firefighters if they have to get into those big timber areas because trees will be falling, and of course the fire itself too, pretty dangerous. But yeah, so it was threatening the Highway 6 corridor, some power lines, the railroads, things like that. So they try to stop it before it gets there.
Oh, okay. So what do you do to keep the firefighters updated?
So what we did was we own aircraft. They're little Cessna 172, so single engine planes, and we have them modified so that we can put our radar sensors and cameras on, and we fly above the fire and actually take images of the ground at different times, and then those images are compared with each other so you can see what has changed between one time and another. The reason we do that is we can tell when the surface changes due to burning or trees falling and things like that. So you're able to get a kind of an accurate picture of the fire as it's moving throughout the event. And then we get that information very quickly, almost in real time, to the incident commanders while we're just sitting there on site. So if we can tell them where the fire's at, what it's doing, how fast it's moving, where it's going, that's very valuable information to the wildland fire guys.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful for them too, and for everyone else.
Yep.
It's really cool.
Yep.
Yeah, did you have permission to fly an aircraft?
Yeah, so we operate under what's called Part 91, so we're a commercial aircraft operator. But during wildfire events like that, the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, sets up what's called a temporary flight restricted zone, or a TFR. That inside that airspace that they lock down for a TFR, only firefighting aircraft are allowed to operate in there. Now, it's not all the way to space, so you can get above it or around it in certain places. And since we were not actually contracted to do the work over the fire, we kind of worked our way around that TFR and stayed outside so that we didn't disturb anything that was going on with the actual firefighting, when they dropped the water and everything. So we actually operated outside of it. The radars and the cameras we use had enough range, so we were still effective.
That's cool.
Yeah, interesting enough though, our aircraft are small, and at some times that temporary flight restricted zone had an altitude that was fairly high, and it was at the very edge of what our aircraft and our pilots could tolerate. So there were some situations where we had to kind of wait for a little while for them to lower that level so that we could actually fly effectively, or else we would have been going over what our airplane can do.
So how much water did you use to get rid of the fire?
So I don't know. We don't drop water.
No water.
They do. And they drop water from helicopters. So they'll set up what they call dip sites, that these helicopters with the baskets underneath them will go to these dip sites. They're either a local lake, or sometimes they even have artificial ones that they'll set up. They'll dip water and drop it on specific trees. When you see the larger aircraft, your air tankers and your very large air tankers, they drop what they call slurry. It's like a red fire retardant, like a chemically treated water that sticks to all the vegetation so that the fire can't go past it. So pretty cool stuff, and it's actually the largest expense on any wildfire is to drop that stuff. It's very expensive, and it stays up for a long time.
Do you have any stories from the fire?
Yeah. So I can share a few stories from the fire. At one point during the fire, it was very windy, and they were trying to keep the fire away from US Route 6 there. It was on the southern side of it, and there's railroads and power lines right along the highway. So they were really trying to keep it out of that area, but the wind was not cooperating. So at one point, the fire actually jumped over the highway and got into the other side and started running towards Diamond Fork. So at that point, the incident commander had us fly our plane and try to identify the extent to which it jumped and grew outside of the boundary they thought that they had. So we were able to go in there and pretty quickly get the cameras on it and tell them where the fire was and where it was headed. And it ended up they got some they call them handline crews. So it's anywhere between 9 and 20 guys literally hiking up with chainsaws, rakes. They call them Pulaskis. It's kind of a shovel, and some 1-inch water hoses connected from the ground. And they actually got around that perimeter of where it was growing across the highway pretty quickly and stopped it. So that was a pretty neat story from the fire itself. Let's see, another one. This fire grew in proportion from what they would consider a Type 2 team to a Type 1. The Type 1 is the most serious incident team that you can have on the ground, big team. So on the Type 2 team, they had to hand that over to the Type 1, and what we were able to do is take some images of the actual incident command post when it was a Type 2 team, and they had like 4 tents and a few cars and stuff like that. But when the Type 1 team came in, it was just a huge operation to get all those people settled. So all of a sudden, between one image with the Type 2 team and the other image with the Type 1 team, you saw this entire camp just get built up pretty much overnight. So it was like a small town by the time that team got fully established. We were there throughout both teams. So what was good was we were able to say, okay, that's what the Type 2 team was doing. What do you need us to do? So we remained on the ground the whole time, didn't even move. So that was good for them to kind of have that handoff between one team and another. And then all of the things that were providing information about the fire stayed there on scene between the two. So it was helpful to them so that they knew everything that happened in the days prior to them arriving.
Well, what kind of cars and trucks do you had?
So let's see, the one that was hauling our trailer, that's a Chevy 3500 long bed. And then we also brought out our Toyota Tacoma, our 1998 Toyota Tacoma, just to kind of run around camp and things like that. So that one's good off-road. That's why we take that one out there. But normally those two vehicles. And then our airplanes are Cessna 172 Skylines that actually have a horsepower modification on them. So they can go a little higher and faster than a normal Cessna.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's really cool. I like it. Hey, thank you for being in the show.
No
nice
problem.
to meet you.
Yep, it was great being here, and I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to kind of share what we do at IMSAR.